In 2010, Gordon Brown, then leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, had a conversation with Gillian Duffy on the campaign trail. She was positioned as an ordinary Labour supporter with some concerns.
Have you been at some of the children's centres?
What I can't understand is why am I still being taxed at 66-year-old because my husband's died and I have some of his pension tagged onto my pension. Why are you going to get us out of all this debt? There's too many people now who aren't vulnerable, but they can claim, and people who are vulnerable can't say anything about the immigrants because you're saying that you're but all these Eastern Europeans what are coming in, where are they flocking from?
Following this interaction, Brown left with Sky News' microphone still on his lapel, leading to an infamous hot mic incident.
Never put me with that woman. Everything. She's just a sort of bigoted woman. Said she used to be Labour. I mean, it's ridiculous.
The words were replayed to Duffy, who responded.
What did I say to be bigoted there? What was bigoted in that? What I said? I just asked about the national debt.
Substantial controversy followed the incident, soon dubbed Bigotgate. Brown was variously portrayed as ungrateful, out of touch, and bad-tempered. But why? After 14 years, it is hard to understand why a single voter being called a bigot was so concerning. This video will present an analysis of the particular phrase bigoted woman through the lens of semantics and pragmatics to get an answer. Firstly, how do we know that Brown is referring to Gillian Duffy when he mentions a bigoted woman? After all, he never mentions Duffy's name in the car. Any reasonable English speaker would, of course, deduce that Duffy is the bigoted woman in question. The exact process by which this occurs is called reference by semanticists and pragmaticists. Here, Duffy is the referent, and bigoted woman the reference. Here is a Brown's utterance will infer from his earlier statement.
Should never have put me with that woman.
That the subsequently mentioned bigoted woman must be a woman he was recently put with. The only woman this could be is Duffy. Thus, any controversy about ambiguity is absent here, unlike in other hot mic incidents. Everyone knew at once that Brown was calling Duffy a bigoted woman, and there could be no denials on his part. With this established, semanticists also distinguish between the utterance, the sounds produced by Brown and recorded by Sky News, the sentence, the linguistic content of Brown's utterance, which may be reproduced by anyone, and the proposition, logical statement to which a truth value may be assigned. From Brown's utterance, she's just a sort of bigoted woman, we can derive the proposition, Duffy is a bigot. This may be either true or false, but not both at once. And yet the very fact that Brown states it reveals that he believes Duffy to be a bigot, while her reaction shows that she does not believe herself to be a bigot. They cannot both be correct. To attempt to assign an objective truth value, we begin with the necessary and sufficient conditions approach, described by Said, and understand that for the generalized proposition, X is a bigot, to be true, the following propositions must also be true. X exists, X is a human, X does not tolerate Y, where Y exists, Y is a group of humans, Y has beliefs or lifestyles different from X. The first two of these are presuppositions, and the third, X does not tolerate Y, is what linguists call entailed. Regardless, all must be true for X to be a bigot. From this we can see that the following propositions are false. The King of France is a bigot. The King of France does not exist. This laptop is a bigot. This laptop is not human. Joe is lactose intolerant, therefore he is a bigot. Milk is not a group of humans. Although the above is fairly simple, linguists note issues with approaches that try to define language with language. It can lead to a problem of circularity. For the proposition X does not tolerate Y, we will have to define tolerate, and what it entails. For a proposition X tolerates Y, we can say that X does not harm Y because of Y's differences from X, and that X does not tolerate Y means X harms Y because of Y's differences from X. Harm here may be direct or indirect, but then what is harm? To harm must be to cause to suffer, but now is suffering measured? To what extent do the intentions of X play into the formula? And so when we define words for abstract concepts like intolerance with other words, we risk going on forever without reaching a conclusion. At some point subjectivity plays a role. For our purposes we will leave the meaning of bigot here, and now see whether our first proposition may be considered true or false. The presupposed and entailed propositions are: Duffy is a bigot. Duffy exists. Duffy is a human. Duffy does not tolerate Y because of Y's differences from Duffy. Duffy harms Y because of Y's differences from Duffy. We know that Duffy exists, and we know that Duffy is a human, so the proposition is not absurd. This leaves only the third entailed proposition. The only statement in which Duffy makes reference to specific groups of people which may qualify as our Y is this one.
You can't say anything about the immigrants because you're saying that but all these Eastern Europeans what are coming in, where are they flocking from?
Her question here is rhetorical. Duffy knows where Eastern Europeans are flocking from, Eastern Europe. So her intention is not just to ask this question. Rather, let us look at the discourse context of her conversation with Brown, which linguists understand as knowledge to which speakers may refer and through which implications may be made. As Duffy complains about high taxation, national debt and benefit fraud, we infer that she has some problems with Brown's government. So, when she mentions Eastern European immigration, we must draw one of the following conclusions. Either Eastern European immigration is a problem like those listed, or Eastern European immigration is a problem causally linked with those listed. Either of these imply that migration from Eastern Europe should be reduced or stopped. The problem of circularity returns again here. Can Duffy's implication that migration from Eastern Europe should be reduced or stopped be considered as fulfilling the proposition Duffy harms Eastern European immigrants? Immigrants can have many reasons to come to the United Kingdom, including for work, to study, or to be with family. However, these are all things available in any country. Generally, due to the cost of migration, people will only migrate if they expect the benefits of migration to outweigh the costs. So it may be the case that a migrant believes that they will earn more money in another country, or be able to get a better education, or spend more time with their family. This is especially true of asylum seekers and refugees, who may have incredibly limited opportunities in their home countries. If migrants would be better off in the UK, then yes, trying to stop them from coming would be harming them. Of course, this decision is not entirely up to Duffy. She is, though, speaking to the Prime Minister, and as a voter can affect what happens to immigrants. Therefore, a kind of indirect harm may apply, as her voting or non-voting, or her speaking to the Prime Minister, may affect subsequent policy, and thus the harm of migrants. Now for the next entailed proposition, which requires that Duffy harm Eastern European immigrants because of some difference from herself. So, what is the difference between Duffy and Eastern European immigrants? While many differences could surely be found, the only one shared by absolutely every immigrant to the United Kingdom is that they are not natural-born citizens, while Duffy is. With the semantic componental analysis, we can attempt to define immigrant and natural-born in terms of what features they do or do not include. However, CA, like many attempts to define the words of natural languages logically or metalinguistically, presents problems here. For example, if a woman and a man who are both born in Poland moved together to the UK and had a child in London, would the child of their union be a natural-born citizen of the United Kingdom? By law, under the British Nationality Act 1981, the answer is a firm no. Yet, before this act came into force, under the British Nationality Act of 1948, the answer would have been yes. Clearly, then, the definition of natural-born and immigrant are more malleable than the antonymous definitions above imply. Additionally, the common usage of words rarely considers their legal applications. The Migration Observatory have produced a briefing on this subject, which highlights that the use of the term migrant in the public discourse is extremely loose and often conflates issues of immigration status, race, ethnicity, and asylum. Outwardly, Eastern Europeans may differ in the language spoken at home, their accent when speaking English, their preferred foods and so on, but we cannot say for certain that Duffy harms them for any of these differences. Despite all that semantics and pragmatics are capable of, they do not allow for mind reading. Given the difficulty in identifying a particular difference between Duffy and Eastern European immigrants, let us turn our attention instead to another part of the proposition. Because. Earlier we found that based upon discourse context we may conclude that Duffy considers Eastern European immigration a problem equal to the others she lists, or considers Eastern European immigration as one cause of the problem she listed, or to restate these as propositions. If one, then Duffy may rightly be called a bigot. If an opposition to immigration comes only from a dislike of immigrants, then it is certainly bigoted. However, if two, the problem becomes more murky. It results in the proposition, Duffy harms immigrants to reduce overall harm. This proposition could lead to an ethical debate which we wish to avoid, keeping the focus here as much as possible upon linguistics. Therefore, we could take another approach to word meaning by looking for prototypical bigots to compare Duffy to, imagining a spectrum of bigotry on which she might exist, or a family relation to others who might be called bigot. In 2010, a strong prototype of bigot would be Nick Griffin, then leader of the British National Party, whom Gordon Brown had also previously called racist and bigoted. Duffy and Griffin provide a stark contrast. Some of Griffin's most definitely bigoted views include his Holocaust denialism, his endorsements of the 14 words, and insinuations that there is a cabal of leftists, capitalists, and Jews engaged in a conspiracy to completely eliminate the so-called white race. Views which Duffy has, of course, not avowed. However, some of Griffin's other statements can be seen to share similarity with sentiments expressed by Duffy.
What you don't like about UKIP is that they're not racist.
UKIP certainly aren't what the Liberal elite call racist, but I know full well that most of the voters are what the Liberal elite call racist. They want immigration shut for good, stopped for good, the whole lot of them, and they want every last troublemaker, every last criminal, every last foreign sponger kicking out. They think they're going to get that with UKIP.
You are the British
not,
National Party. You would accept you are what the Liberal elite call racist.
Yep, we are indeed what you call racist.
So what, you want not just to stop people coming in, but you want to start kicking them out?
We want to stop people coming in, all of them, and that's the big difference. UKIP don't. UKIP want to keep out white Poles and let in huge numbers of Pakistanis and Africans. That's a huge difference.
Again, applying pragmatics, the obvious similarity is the mention of the need to keep out white Poles compared to Duffy's mention of all these Eastern Europeans. Just like Duffy's statement implies a link between Eastern Europeans and high taxation, national debt and benefit fraud, Griffin implies a link between white Poles and troublemakers, criminals and sponges. On this subject, they both seem to have the practical view of immigration expressed in the second proposition. Very interestingly, Griffin makes a rather astute observation in his reaction to being called racist. While Duffy asks what was bigoted in that what I said, Griffin sardonically proclaims, yes, we are indeed what you would call racist. However, Griffin later rejects this label.
So when we say we want to stop them all coming in and kick out the hate preachers, kick out the illegals, kick out the criminals, that's what you call racist. I don't think it is. Or more important, millions of British voters who just voted UKIP, they don't think it's racist either. They're going to find out their votes were mistaken. They've only got one proper home, and that's with the BNP.
Yeah. Part of the backlash to Bigotgate was the fact that many voters agreed with the proposition it is right to harm immigrants to reduce overall harm. What Griffin is observing here is that this is a fairly popular opinion in the United Kingdom. Polls and election results vindicate him. So popular is this view that it is now official government policy. When Theresa May was Home Secretary, the Conservative government began to implement a hostile environment, a set of measures intended to make life difficult for individuals without permission to remain in the UK. A policy that has been continued by subsequent Home Secretaries, such as through the government's attempts to implement the so-called Rwanda Plan. We can derive a proposition from the hostile environment policy that resembles those previously stated. The British government harms immigrants to reduce overall harm. Thus, the proposition of Duffy, made more fiercely by Griffin, has made its way into government policy. We can attribute this to many factors, but among them is undoubtedly Bigotgate. Is it really right, then, to call some of these bigots and others not? This brings us to our final point, the use of pejoratives. Thus, when Brown called Duffy a bigot, many referred to what he had said as a slur. Semanticists have already made the distinction between slurs and words which would theoretically be synonyms with them. Bosch, a slur against German people, is one example. To say X is a Bosch, we not only say X is German, but also X is cruel, thereby associating Germanness and cruelty. Likewise, bigot carries with it the implication of irrationality. In addition to our previously stated necessary and sufficient conditions for bigot, we can add X is irrational. Because what rational person would harm another simply because they are different from themselves? This fact of the definition can be seen in many of the dictionary definitions of bigot previously cited, which may also include such adjectives as unreasonable. This is all, of course, subjective value judgment. Nobody believes themselves a bigot because nobody believes that they would harm another person simply because that person is different from themselves. To do so would seem altogether irrational. Justifications for harm tend towards much greater complexity and emotionality. In discussions which may stray into controversial topics, we should be careful not to dismiss large groups as bigots, a lesson that many politicians have come to learn, while also recognizing that, whether one justifies their actions practically or hatefully, the actions may remain the same. As we have seen the difference between what is fringe and what is mainstream, that which is called bigoted and that which is not, may be mere semantics.